I'm Catherine Sheeran, host of the podcast Horse Tales with Cat. My guest today was born in Sainte-Félie-de-Valois, but now makes his home in Aiken, South Carolina. Michel Vaillancourt remains the youngest Canadian equestrian to have ever won a medal at the Olympics and the first rider from Quebec to have ever represented Canada at the Olympics. Michel was a member of the bronze medal team at the 1975 Pan American Games in Mexico City. He won an individual silver medal at the 1976 Olympics in Bromont aboard his mount, Branch County, where the team finished fifth overall. Michel was also a member of the silver medal team at the Pan American Games in Puerto Rico in 1979. He represented Canada at the alternate Olympics in Rotterdam in 1980, where Canada took home the gold. Michel went on to be the Canadian chef de keep from 1994 to 1998 and developed a career as an FEI Level 4 horse designer who has designed at venues around the globe. Today, he continues to train, give clinics, and design at competitions throughout the US and Canada. Michel, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
I have to admit, when I was doing the research, I'd forgotten that your life is a little bit like a book. The story is really quite remarkable. I know you began riding at a very early age and you showed promise at a very early age, but maybe you can share the story of that journey for our listeners.
Well, as far as my debut in the sport, it all started. This is kind of a little funny story, but it all started at the fairground when I was about 6 years old. And all I wanted to do is get on the pony rides. And I was there with my dad, and we would do the pony rides, and then we would go do something else. And then he said, well, what would you like to do next? And I'd say, well, I'd like to go back to the pony ride. So we went back to the pony ride at 25 cents a shot at the time, about six, seven times, I don't know. So then he thought, well, I mean, he seems to really enjoy this. So he bought me a pony. He had to pick up the pony. This is a long time ago, obviously. Picked up the pony on the other side of Montreal. I had to drive right through the city. And in order to take this pony home, he and a buddy of his had taken out the back seat of the car and put the pony in the back seat, technically. And of course, as they're coming to red lights and stuff like that, the pony would stick its head outside of the window and, created a hell of a chuckle for everybody that saw this scene go by. I rode the pony for quite a while, and then eventually we had a pretty big family. My dad, had a lot of siblings, and it turned out that one pony became three and became five and became seven ponies and whatever, whatever. And then eventually the adults said, well, this is really cool, but what about us? So they started having horses at our home in this little village of Saint-Barnabé-Sud, just outside of Saint-Hyacinthe, about 7 miles outside of Saint-Hyacinthe. And the bigger horses kind of got me a little bit spooked. I thought they were a little bit too large for me. I was not so keen on that. And the real kicker here is when I really started riding is because I had a lot of friends, classmates and stuff like that, that would say to me that they would like to ride. And we had about three or four horses in a pasture about 2 miles away from home. And we would take our bicycles and get to the pasture and put a rope around the halters of each horse and just jump on him bareback and ride around in the pasture. So I kind of developed a sense of security doing that. And I came home one day and I said, I'd like to ride. And of course, they put me on a horse and they're leading me around. I said, no, you can let him go, really. And that's kind of how it all started. So I started riding bigger horses again, but I still didn't have a lot of interest. And when I was about 11 years old, my dad still had a barn. At that point, he had kind of evolved into doing a little bit of a business with horses, buying and selling horses and so on and so forth. And so I went to the barn that night and he made me jump for the first time. And oh boy, I mean, from that day on, I was hooked totally. I remember for the first little while, I fell off every night, but I would still get back on and jump again. And I mean, we had one little fence inside this small little indoor arena that my dad had turned a cow barn into a little bit of an arena. And basically, we jumped a bunch of hay bales with a pole on top, So I did that every night. And from that moment, I just never looked back. Like I was every weekend, every evening. I mean, that was my life. And Dad and I had an incredible relationship.
And if I'm not mistaken, were you not Canadian junior champion at age 16? Is that correct?
Yeah, I started competing, I was about 11, and we were only doing like real schooling show, provincial show types, and slowly evolved and started moving up the ranks a little bit, going to bigger shows. And I kind of had a really good junior career as a junior rider. And at some point in time, there was this competition in Toronto, the Junior International Horse Show, it was called. And in order to participate, you had to come and do a trial session the weekend before the horse show started. And the parameters were that if you qualified on the Canadian junior team, you had to offer your horse as part of the deal. So the horse that I basically qualified in ended up on the Mexican team or something. We could not ride our own horses. So I was 16 at the time, and I was fortunate enough, and I won that championship. And from that point on, I did a lot of international shows as a junior where if Canada received an invitation to send a junior rider to any one of those competitions, I would be one of the first one that they would call and say, hey, we just got an invitation for someone to go and ride somewhere in Puerto Rico. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, for sure. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And I represented my country when I was quite young. It kind of gave me a little bit of a boost, kind of gave me a big start. And my dad was very optimistic, I guess. And of course, the quality of the stock got better and better. And I rode a little stallion called Le Dauphin that really launched my career. He was a fantastic horse. And in those days, we were allowed to ride a stallion, which eventually we were not allowed to ride stallions anymore. But I learned to stay away from the group. I learned to stay by myself so we would not get distracted. And I remember doing an event in Ottawa, the Ottawa Winter Fair, which existed at the time, was a major national competition prior to the Royal Winter Fair. And there was an open jumper class every night for 5 nights, and I won the first 4 nights
That's
in a row.
remarkable.
And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm beating Jimmy Elder and I'm beating Jimmy Day and Tommy Gayford and Torchy Miller and all my idols. I mean, I was over the moon, obviously. And then that horse got sold, and but I ended up with more. And Dad was always great at finding horses and keeping me well mounted. And I competed at the Royal Winter Fair at the age of 16 in the national division. I skipped the juniors altogether. I went straight to the national division and got a few ribbons. So that was kind of the beginning of my junior career.
Well, I was very much struck by the fact that your father really believed in your gift and that he supported it. I'm assuming, were you an only child?
No, I have a sister.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she wrote great too.
Okay. I was really struck by the support that you got from your father in realizing this dream and recognizing your passion and your gifts. And then sadly, you lost your father at 17. I imagine that had to be a really tough time in your life
Of course. Yeah, of course.
because you're at a transition just in life.
I was actually 16,
You
yeah,
were
when he died.
16.
Yeah.
Wow.
Have a horse accident. He had a rotational fall, like we've seen too many times. The accident happened at home. I was there, actually. We had an old gentleman that used to look after our horses. Charlie White was his name. I still remember that. A great old guy. And there was just the two of us watching Dad basically go through some gymnastic routine and met a fence really badly. And the fence was obviously not safe at the time, but we changed that over the course of the years, but nonetheless. And I have to sort of mention that my dad was like my best friend, really, we're
I
really tight together. And I was very fortunate in a sense because I knew what I wanted to do once I started really getting involved in showing and, the jumpers and everything else. I kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do with my life. But the real kicker is that I had the talent to do it because I've seen so many kids that have the same dream but cannot really accomplish it because something's missing. So I was blessed in the sense that I had that natural ability. I could read distances really well. I could see a spot for a long time. I mean, 7 strides out. And so it was a little bit of a natural gift for me. But again, fortunate enough to do what I wanted to do and have the capability of doing it.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by the international law firm of Cooley LLP. Clients partner with Cooley on transformative deals, complex IP and regulatory matters, and high-stakes litigation. Cooley has nearly 1,400 lawyers across 19 offices in the United States, Asia, and Europe, and a total workforce of more than 3,000 people. Our connection to the law firm comes through Cooley partner and jumper rider Cullen Drescher, who competes in the high amateur and Grand Prix levels, in addition to leading Cooley's business restructuring practice from the firm's offices in New York City. So fast forward to when you went at 21, if I'm not mistaken, to the 1975 Pan Americans. And did I read correctly that the reason you actually got to compete was you were the alternate, but somebody broke their arm? Who broke their arm? I was trying to think who broke their arm at that time.
Well, I'll tell you that. First of all, I had a horse that my dad had imported from Cuba, a little black stallion called the Muji, that we sold to one of dad's customer. And then eventually the horse went to Florida. After my dad died, the horse went to Florida with Steve Steven. Steve showed him all the way up to the open jumper level. In these days, we call it the Grand Prix level. And then the horse came back to Canada, went to Jimmy Elder. And in 1975, we purchased that horse, bought him back technically, because we were missing a top level horse. And we thought that this horse was going to be my ticket to the Olympic Games. And he had an ending career injury at the Chagrin Valley Horse Show in Cleveland in July. I think it was July. So at that point, he was leading the trials to go to the Pan Am Games. And the jumping committee at the time, the last trial, actually, he was already out. And I showed my junior jumper, a little horse called UFO, that was dear to me. And I showed him in the last trial, and he did really well in the last trial. And the jumping committee decided to bring me on as a spare rider to give me experience. So while we were in Mexico, the person that broke his arm was Ian Miller.
I never realized that.
Yes, it was Ian, and it was a stupid accident, which, accidents are all stupid. But anyways, he was literally trotting to a cross rail. And the horse kind of stumble, and Ian went over his head and ended up having his arm caught under the rail, and the rail broken. Anyway, so it broke his arm. And in those days, the individual competition, each country could only send 3 riders. So once again, between the coach and the committee, they decided that because all of my training sessions had been going really well, that they bumped me basically from 5th to 3rd. So I got to compete in the individual competition, which, by the way, I was 1 rail away from an individual medal on a horse that probably didn't really belong there, but he had a heart of gold. So, and then competed in the team competition, which was held in the main stadium in Mexico City with about 100,000 people screaming and yelling. It was quite something. It was a very valuable experience, that's for sure.
What a lovely debut.
I know.
So then the next year, it's the Olympics. And if, again, the story is correct, you acquire Branch County about 3 months before the Olympics in March, and I think the Olympics were in July. But what's also remarkable, this is why I feel like your entire story should be a movie. So this horse, Branch County, Branch County was originally a racehorse called Traffic Sub that had not been very remarkable as a 3-year-old and 4-year-old in racing. But the gentleman that owned him was a former jockey by the name of Bill Teskey. And he saw that this horse, somehow he figured it had some sort of talent for jumping. So how did the connection happen between you and Bill Teskey?
Well, it all started at the Royal Winter Fair in 1975. And at that time, there was 2 divisions at the Royal, one for the national level and one for the international level. I didn't even have a jumper that particular week because I didn't have enough stock to be on the team. UFO had done his part, at the Pan Am Games, but enough was enough. And I saw this horse, Branch County, in the national division. He was ridden at the time by a gentleman by the name of Robin Hahn, who was an eventing rider. Actually was on the eventing team in 76 as well. And I saw this horse and totally fell in love with him for whatever reason. Had a really bad front end. He did not have what we call the right gymnastic way of jumping. He was really sloppy with his front end, but his shoulders always came up and he was so generous. And he, in all fairness, he got Robin out of trouble several times. And I kind of thought, wow, this is the horse I want. So we met Mr. Teskey, who was a racehorse trainer, actually, in Winnipeg. So we could consider that a B-rank trainer. And we met with him and had long discussion, and we tried to purchase the horse. And we could not, we did agree to a price, and I got on the job right away and started looking for potential owners that would be interested in investing into this project. And we basically had two guys that were on board, and we were missing a third, and the third never materialized. So we could not purchase. By the time we got around to Christmas time, still nothing. We could not come to an agreement. And we kind of almost forgot about it. And we went to Florida. I was riding with Pierre Jolicoeur and Robert, the older brother. And Robert stayed home. Every year he would actually stay home while Pierre and I would go to Florida and compete in order to look after the clients that were not in Florida and to look after the farm and the operation. While we were gone, he stayed in contact with Mr. Teskey, and we finally made an arrangement to lease the horse. So we leased the horse, and the arrangement was that we would lease the horse, and if the horse qualified for the Olympic Games, there was a surplus in the lease, and we had to insure him. So all of that came together by the month of March. And so when it was finalized, it was right at the end of the circuit. I was competing in the American Invitational on a Saturday night, and the very next morning, I jumped on the plane and flew to Regina, which Regina still has an event, I believe. It was considered a pretty major event back in the days as far as the location in the prairies. And I would say it was not a level of international level at all, but they had a Grand Prix and things like that. So I flew to Regina. I got there Sunday night, whatever. So I sat on Branch County Monday morning for the very first time, because even though we tried to buy him, we could never come up with an agreement. So I never even tried the horse. I never sat on the horse until that day in March. So I'm walking, trotting, cantering around in the warm-up area, and right away it just felt great. I don't know, there was something about him, the way we felt with each other. But I went to trot over a crossrail, and he stopped. So I give him a little tap with the stick, and the owner looked at me with a smile. He says, "Yeah, he's been doing a little bit of that lately, but he'll be fine." And I'm thinking, "Oh my God, here we go." But nevertheless, by the time we got to the end of the week, he won the Grand Prix. And then we went on to another event in Moose Jaw, which it was a little bit of a series. Both events were indoor, obviously, in March. And he did not win the Grand Prix that particular week, but he did well. I can't remember what happened, but he did well. So then we finally got the horse home. After all of that, we went back to Winnipeg for a little rest, and then horse got shipped to Robespierre Stables in Hudson, Quebec. And that's when we started our training program in order to get to the Olympic Games. So he was a 7-year-old at the point. When I saw him at the Royal, he was only a 6-year-old. So he was only 7. His biggest competition was the national jumper division at the Royal. And he had never done anything internationally, for sure. He was obviously way too young. But in those days, things were a little bit different. We dealt with thoroughbreds most of the time. We kind of made him up a lot faster than the way Europeans do things. Like in this day and age, I'm not even sure. I mean, it would be a sacrilege to ride a 7-year-old at the Olympic Games in this day and age. Even a 9-year-old is considered super young. So, but the time was of the essence. We only had, okay, 3 months before the games, but we only had 6 weeks before the first Canadian trial. And Team Canada had hired a guy by the name of Carl Nee, who was a top American trainer. And he had connections in Canada. He had sold horses in Canada and trained people. He worked a lot with Jimmy Day, and they decided that he would be the right person to have as our coach for Montreal. So we brought him over to the farm and we showed him the horse. We said, look, I want to show you what this horse is capable of doing. So we had a pretty heavy duty training session, and he loved him just as much as we all did. But he was very strict with me in a sense that he says, look, Michel, he says, the horse is super young. You're only 21 years old, no experience whatsoever. You did the Pan Am Games, but that's one thing. But this horse has never gone to any event of that caliber for sure. So he says the way the system works is at the end of the trials that we will have, the top 2 qualifiers on trials will automatically be on the team. And then the selection committee will be responsible to select 3 more horse rider combination to complete the team. So 2 of those will be on the team and 1 will be a spare rider. So he says, you have no shot unless you qualify in the top 2, because there's no way I'm going to be able to convince the jumping committee to put you on a team at your age and at the age of the horse. So we said, well, the rules are clear and we understand, and that's not a problem. We'll go along with this. And so he did qualify second after the trials. So bang, so here we were on the team. But the training did not stop. And the only reason why this whole thing really worked was because of Branch County himself. He was an incredible animal. He was super smart, and his jumping ability were next to, unbelievable. Like he had so much power. And even though his form was always a bit shaky, he had to make a little bit of an extra effort because his knees never really came up that high, but his shoulders did. So he made up for that. He was really afraid of water at first. And we knew we were going to have the big water jump in Bromont, which was in those days at the Olympic Games in Bromont, the water jump was 16 feet wide, which we're not even allowed to do that anymore. 14 and a half is the max we can use. So 16 was a lot of water. We knew we were going to have a lot of water element besides the open water on course with all the liver pools and everything else. And so he got over that pretty quickly. But every time that we introduced something a little bit new to him, he would kind of figure it out. And once he figured it out, it was done. We were able to move on to the next issue. We never had to sort of go back a step or two and refresh his memory about what was learned the day before or the day before that. And because we didn't jump him every day, obviously. He got a pretty serious coup probably twice a week. But he would always pick it up, and once he got it, he got it. So even after we were qualified for the Olympics, I remember we kept going to events. We did not stop. I remember going to Lake Placid, specifically Lake Placid, which was a big horse show at the time, one of the biggest in America, just to continue to fine-tune a few little things that we needed to do with him. So that's basically how we got to the Olympic Games.
May I also add that I would think you're maybe downplaying a little bit your relationship with him, because clearly you understood his gift and gave him confidence, and he believed in you, because I think that's what's always remarkable when horse rider combinations have great success. A lot of riders will give all the credit to the horse, but I also feel like, would that horse have done it with anyone else? I think you had enough belief in it and enough confidence in yourself and enough dream and passion that the two of you were magical. And now when we go on to the actual Olympic story, again, it should be a movie. So maybe share with our listeners how that all went down, because I was watching the videos last night, and the rain, the crowds, the jump off. Please share that story. It was amazing.
Well, first of all, once we got to Bromont, we were razor focused on the event itself. And winning a medal was not part of the equation, really. We wanted to do well. We wanted to represent our country well. Our main goal was to have a top 10 finish, which was a very aggressive goal to begin with. It was almost impossible. And when we talk about the relationship between Branch County and myself, yes, of course, we gelled and bond almost instantly. After that little mishap at the crossrail, things were on the up and up from that point on. But I believed in him. I totally believed in him. And obviously, he allowed me to guide him properly. So the course in Bromont was, I didn't really realize that at the time, but it was one of the biggest Olympic course ever built, ever designed. There was some huge fences in Mexico City, but I think Bromont was even harder for different reasons. It was a lot more technical and but the equipment was heavy. I like to call Bromont, and that came to me years afterwards, that Bromont was the last of the massive Olympic Games. And I say massive because there was only one clear round in the first round. There was only one clear round in the second round. There was no clear rounds in the team competition at all. That was for a different reason, but still, we don't see that anymore. We see more clear rounds. We see more results that are not killer results. I mean, Bromont, people fell down, horses went tipped over. I mean, it was a really massive course.
And I have to interject because I was also
Yeah.
struck by the size of the rails. They were massive.
The rails
And
were too big, yeah.
they looked heavy and they were natural obstacles. I mean, I saw what looked like birch tree rails that looked
That
like
was the
they
famous,
just.
yeah, the famous triple combination. So we'll
Mhm.
get to that. So basically, the first round was obviously a tough course, and most of the experienced riders and experienced trainers realized it as soon as we walked onto the arena that, wow, this is a massive course. But as far as we were concerned, we thought, well, that's kind of what we expected because I said, well, that's the Olympic Games. It should be that way. I'm assuming it should be that way. 2 or 3 Olympiads later, I realized that it should not have been that way, but that's the way it was. So it didn't faze me at all because to me, the harder the course was, the better chance I had, I felt, because I had a horse that had a lot of power. And so after the first round, we had the last fence down. And after having the last fence down, I came out of the ring and I thought, wow, my hopes are a little slim right now because I had 4 faults. And I didn't realize that until we got to the end of the first round, that 4 faults was the second best score of the day in that round. There was only one clear round. Then we had a bit of a break. They changed the course. Then we walked the second round. And the second round was even bigger than the first round. It felt like the second round was almost impossible. And as you mentioned, those famous birch rails, the triple combination, which was the last element, and that's old-fashioned a little bit, but the last element of the second round was a triple bar over a Liverpool. And the whole combination was built out of birch rails, natural birch rails that were flimsy and had a little bit of a spring bounce to them. And so triple bar at fence A over a Liverpool, 2 stride to a vertical fence B over another Liverpool, 1 stride to a massive oxer that had to be close to 7 feet wide coming out. And by the time I went in, believe I was about 21st into the second round. And I was the first horse, or Branch was the first horse to actually jump that triple without knocking anything down. He was the first one to jump the triple clear, but he had a foot in the water. He cleared the water the first round, but he had a foot in the water. And he had one of the vertical in the double combination that was a pair vertical at maximum height, both at 165, I believe. So we had 8 faults in the second round. And then I thought, oh, well, now we're done for sure. And with 8 faults, I'm sitting with a total of 12. It's impossible. It's not going to work. So by the time the second round is over, well, here we're still in the thick of things. And we're going like, oh my God, check this out. We're still part of it. And so we ended up with 3 horse rider combination that were tied for second with a total of 12 faults. So that goes to show you how difficult both rounds had been previous to that. So now I'm having to go in the jump off, and I was first into the jump off. And as the last horse was going on in the second round, All Win Shook 'em All on Warwick Rex, who ended up winning the gold. They were the last to go and jump a clear round as well. There was no way he was going to knock 3 fences down. and jumped a clear round as well to secure the gold. But as he's going around the course, I mean, thunder, lightning, the rain hadn't started yet, but I mean, it was coming fast and furious. And he managed to finish the second round. And every time there was a lightning, that horse jumped higher. And by the time he was done, well, he was definitely by a long shot the individual gold medal. So we had to go into a jump off. But then it started to rain. As soon as the second round was over, it poured. And it poured for about 20 minutes, but a deluge kind of pour. So then they get us ready to come back in the jump off. The arena was covered in water. I mean, totally covered in water. Felt like you're jumping a little bit on the lake, you know? And so I walked into the ring and I was waiting for the bell to ring so I could start my jump off round, which was the jump off was a big jump off round. It included both the double and the triple combination, which you would never see in this day and age. And but the bell was not ringing. And I'm going like, what's going on? And eventually one of the judges came down from the judges' tower, came into the ring and came toward me and told me at the time that they were going to hold off for about 15, 20 minutes to allow the footing to dry out. So if you really understand the story, right? Here I am. I had turned 22 the day before. I'm sitting on a 7-year-old who's already jumped 2 massive rounds. I've already warmed up over X number of fences. Now I'm ready to go. The adrenaline is pumping pretty hard. And I'm told that we're going to have to wait. Well, I'm like, oh my God. So I came out of the ring. And in all fairness, my biggest concern was I know I'm going to have to jump a couple of extra jumps before I go back in again. How many big fences can a horse jump in one day? And funny enough, the crowd stayed. I mean, nobody left. There was no cover. Everybody got soaked totally. And nobody left. So finally, I go back in once they told us, okay, we're good to go. I go back in. And that time, he knocked one down in the triple combination. So we had a score of 4 faults pretty fast. I tried to go pretty quick. And as I came out of the ring, I thought, well, I don't know if that's going to be enough, but let's see. It sucks really when you think about it. 3 riders tied for second, and one of us is going to get nothing. You could say, oh, I was fourth at the Olympic Games, but a medal is a medal. A no medal is a no medal. So once I came out of the ring, there was a big berm between the main arena and the warm-up ring. And we had to weigh out in those days. Each rider had to carry a minimum of 165 pounds, and the ladies had to carry a minimum of 154 pounds. So I had to carry, because I was really skinny when I was that age, I had to carry a couple extra pounds of weight in my saddle. I had a special pad made up so I could slide a couple pieces of lead to bring myself up to 165. And that included the saddle and everything. I probably weighed about 130, 135. So as I'm weighing out that time around, but mind you, I had been soaked because the rain came down before the jump off. And so I was like 5 pounds overweight. So anyways, by the time I did that, the second horse was on course, and it was a young girl, an 18-year-old young girl from Britain. And she got into trouble in the double big time. She knocked the A down and then stopped at B. So as soon as that happened, then I was guaranteed a medal. So from the top of the berm, our group was standing there. The coach was there. My coach, Pierre Jolicoeur, and whoever else was present at the time, kind of turned around, looked down at the hill to me, and it says, hey, we got a medal. Then once that was done, I was able to get back up the hill, and the last horse was Francois Maty from Belgium. He had 2 down with a slower time, so that guarantees us the silver. And as my first Olympic Games, and as Carl Nee, our coach, his first Olympic Games, he turned around to me, he looked at me, he says, well, hell, that was not so hard.
So I can't even imagine the feeling. There had to be so much emotion because I feel like you're a Quebecer. Apparently, you were the only Quebecer to actually win an Olympic medal at those Olympics. You're the
I
first
think there
Quebec.
was a team. I think there was a synchronized swimming team that may have gotten a silver as well.
Oh,
But
right. I
anyways,
think you were the first, you were the only individual medal, I think, by a Quebec
right.
athlete. And the
Yeah.
first time someone from Quebec even was representing Canada on a show jumping team. So there were so many firsts. And then imagining you're in your home province, your father, there's no question in my mind, your father was there in spirit. Can you share, how did you feel in that moment? Are there even words that can express what was
I
going
don't
through
think
your?
so. Well, first of all, I did not feel the pressure being a French Canadian. I did not feel that kind of pressure. I did not feel the pressure of being a Canadian. I mean, I was proud of it, obviously. It was just me against the course, technically. It was not even me against the other participant. It was me against this course. And I guess I realized it more as I got older, as time went by. And when I did realize the accomplishment that we had just done, that was obviously unheard of, totally. So, yeah, I mean, a great satisfaction, it was a really proud moment.
Well, and I know I spoke with Mario Delorier last year, and he said you were an inspiration for him. Him seeing what you did at those Olympics inspired him as a young rider wanting to go ahead. And I feel like you did pave the way for a lot of Canadian riders because it just hadn't been done before. And traditionally, it feels like Canada has been the underdog at the equestrian events simply because we don't have the same number of riders and horses. There's just not the same depth as other
Right,
countries. So I feel
right.
like that was a momentous occasion for everybody.
Well, Canada was, even though we were the underdogs in a lot of competition, I mean, let's not forget that Canada won the gold medal in Mexico. And let's not forget that 2 years later, they won the world championship in La Baule in France. And that individual medal kind of kept Canada in the league of the competitive countries in show jumping. I think we lost track a little bit after that. But your point is perfectly on par because yeah, Mario witnessed something that he felt he could do as well. And I'm sure Eric Lamas probably felt the same way that because none of us, between Eric, Mario, and myself, we don't come from wealthy families. We never had daddy buy us top horses. We worked for what we had. And those particular games, it was a team effort. It was Pierre, myself, Robert, Nicole, my groom, which I have one of the greatest picture for me. One of them that sums it all up is I was just getting off of him just before getting onto the podium. And my groom, Nicole, was on one side and I'm on the other side. And I'm giving the horse a big pat and thinking, wow, you did it for us, buddy. And Nicole, she was a sweet, sweet girl. She was French, actually, and she came on the North American circuit with the French team and ended up staying with us in Canada for years afterwards. And before the jump off, she was serious. She said to me, she goes, "You're not going to go, are you?" In the jump off. And I said, "Why not?" And she goes, "Well, don't you think he's had enough?" She loved that horse, right? That much. And I said, "Well, Nicole, he might have to try one more time, one last round. I promise after that it's over."
Well, and to your earlier point, when you said you wonder how many jumps does a horse have in it on any given day, and it is phenomenal to think that the horse did that many rounds of that many jumps, that they weren't shortened courses, they were still full courses. It really is mind blowing to think that that's the way it happened back in those days.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know. And like I said, massive, massive jumps. They jump big now. I mean, look, the sport has changed a lot, which it should have. And those games that's why I nicknamed them the last of the massive games. The last games where we have massive, massive jumps. We're allowing the riders to showcase themselves a little bit more than just the horse showcase themselves. I mean, obviously, it has to become from a partnership. It has to be horse rider combination. It's just not one without the other. And for me, that accomplishment will always stay with me. Hell, we're still talking about it 50 years later. It's the 50th anniversary this year of the Olympics. And I was 22 years old when I won my medal. I turned 22 the day before. That was my gift to myself. And I'm still the youngest. We went through the record recently, actually, still the youngest individual medal winner in show jumping. I don't know if they might be someone younger as a member of a team, but that I'm not sure. But as an individual, for sure. And definitely one of the youngest horse that probably ever did that as well, in Branch County. So.
And I love that you went on to go to the Pan Americans in 1979 and the team won silver there. Am I
Yeah.
correct? And then you go
Yes.
on to the alternate Olympics, and we kind of gloss over the fact that the team won gold. I mean, it was for all intents and purposes an Olympics, even
That's
though
right.
it wasn't the official Olympics, because it seems to me that most teams boycotted Moscow. And
Yeah.
so in Rotterdam, you brought home a gold. You went on to have an amazing career as a rider. And then at what point did you decide to try your hand at course design? Well, no, I apologize. I also realized that you were the chef to keep in there for 4 years. Did
Yeah.
you do the course designing before the chef to keep or during or after? How did that all unfold? Because I think it's also really lovely to see how you've transitioned throughout your life, taking on a lot of different skills that all have to do with the horse, but that test you in different ways.
Right. Well, if we start at the beginning a little bit, of course, after the Olympic Games, then I relocated in Toronto. There was a time when business was getting really tough in Quebec. I ended up going to Calgary for about 8 years or 9 years or something like that. Then I came back to Toronto. But nonetheless, there was a high demand, and I was very involved in coaching. And I had and I had a barn, and I became a coach as well as a rider. And because I think we pretty much all of us have to do that in order to survive, in order to run a profitable business. It was very difficult for Canadian riders and even American riders at the time to only concentrate on riding and riding alone. So coaching became part of my life as well. And I really enjoyed that part of the business. And our sport was behind most other sports in Canada where we did not have an actual coaching program. And I ended up as part of a group that technically created the coaching program that exists right now in Canada, where we certified coaches. Because we were one of the only sport left where we had no qualification whatsoever to be a coach. You're not going to send your kid to learn how to ski and put that kid in the hands of a coach that has no certification at all. So we were getting a lot of pressure from Sports Canada, who was obviously our main sponsor, to create a coaching program that made sense. So we took the existing coaching program that only dealt with one athlete, not two like we have. So the horse was totally out of the equation. So we transformed the coaching, that particular program, and adapted it so it included the horse athlete as part of it. So I worked on that for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, if not more. And by the time the whole thing was said and done, Canada was at the time then looking for their first official national. We had, Chef de Keep. We had Tommy Gayford, who was the coach for many, many years. He was my first coach, but he was mainly a chef de keep. He was not so much of a coach. So when it was time to look for the first national coach to steer our Olympic teams in the right direction, I got a lot of push to do that. I got a lot of people that said, you've done so much work with the program in itself. You've ridden to the top level. You are a sought after coach. So we really think that position should be yours. And I was quite young. I was only 40 at the time. And I had to make a pretty hard decision whether I kept on riding or whether I became the coach, because you cannot do both, obviously. And I thought that if I bypassed it that time, that God knows if it will ever come back around to me again. So I accepted the position, let's put it this way. And because I accepted the position, it also freed up. I had to close my barn, all of that for conflict of interest reason, close the barn, not have any personal students. One day could become an Olympian, and then make sure that the coach does not show any favoritism, whatever. So it freed up a little bit of time, and it allowed me to sort of do more course designing, which I had started a little bit. I had started dabbling in that a little bit beforehand. So it gave me more time. And by being a course designer, I was also able to do some of the courses at some of the events that our top riders were competing at. So it was giving me a good gauge as to where each athlete stood, how the horses were performing. So it basically allowed me to keep an eye on everybody at the same time. So it was a win-win situation for me. And after the cycle, I realized right away that this job was not really for me. The coaching part of it was great. I just didn't like the relationship that got created between me and some of the riders. Because as a coach, I was responsible, for instance, to name the team that was going to represent us in Washington and name the team that was going to represent us at New York or Toronto. And whenever you leave someone off that team, well, you're just created a little bit of a friction between you and that person. And I didn't like that part because I was always very friendly with all my peers, with all the riders. There was a relationship that was always bonded with each other. And that was for the first time when we didn't bond with each other anymore because I was making decisions that they may not have been satisfied with. And so after the full cycle, I realized that that was not really for me. And that's when I started really concentrating more on course design and go from there. So as you mentioned, yes, I mean, I was very fortunate that I had an incredible career as a rider, and I had an incredible career as a coach, and I had an incredible career as a course designer, which allowed me all three phases to be in the sport that I love, to be in, and to do it at the top level. I see people that went from stardom to next to nothing, and just in order to make a living, do certain things that I didn't really care for. But it allowed me to stay at the top level. It allowed me to do some of the biggest events in the world in every phases of my life. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to do that.
And I would also say that you continue to do it at the top level, which is also fun.
I'm trying to slow down, though. I'm really trying to slow down.
You and Leopoldo Palacio.
Right. Well, like a good rider, you kind of know when it's time to sort of give it up. I'm still passionate about course design. Of course, I mean, I'm still very passionate about it. And I'm a real critique, when I see other people's work, I kind of refer to my work and I say, I would not have done this way. I mean, don't do this way. But you get to a point where there's a lot of young course designers coming up the ranks right now. There's people, I mean, at some point when my reputation as a course designer was at the top, I mean, I was doing almost every big show in America. And obviously I took someone else's position away from them. When I got on the team to go to Montreal, I took somebody else's spot. This is how we looked at it. We didn't say, well, we have to do well. No, who do we have to beat in order to get on this team? So who do I have to beat to get the job to do a certain event? But then at some point, I still would like to mentor some young course designers. My opinion is free. I'm more than happy to help people accomplish their dreams as well. But I do know what is required to be a good course designer. It's not just about being able to build a Grand Prix course. It's about being able to build something proper for the young generation, build something proper for the young horses and bring them along. It's not about taking the Grand Prix course and just dropping it down and letting these guys go at it. It's about modifying. It's about making sure that everybody is safe and making sure that competition is exciting and that there's still beauty to the element of the course, that we're basically creating the visual of it all. And it's super important. I mean, the course designer is probably the most important person on the showground. There's one of us and there's 50 riders. The odds are not in my favor. 50 that want to challenge my course, and I'm all by myself against all of them. But nonetheless, I enjoy that kind of pressure. But
I liked that I had read somewhere that your philosophy is that the question should build each day for the horse. I think that's just a lovely sentiment when I heard that, because yes, it only makes sense to your point with young horses that you want them to feel more confident each day as they build through the week.
If you leave a competition feeling that you've been beaten up, then something went wrong. You have to leave a competition thinking that your horse had learned something positive, or the young rider has learned something positive. So they should be better by the time they finish that week. If they finish worse than the way they started, then obviously maybe the course design has failed them. So it is our responsibility. And when I do a show like the Royal Winter Fair, which was one of my favorite shows to do all the time, I did the last time I did it, which was probably the last time I'll ever do it, was for the 100th anniversary. But we're building courses for these horse and rider combination. We're building courses for the crowd that's there, that's very knowledgeable. We want to create a good spectacle. It has to become a great event with a fantastic jump off and a fantastic result. That's what we're aiming for. I mean, I think that between the rider, course design, and training, we're all in it for the same reason. We all want to create good sport at the end.
And I also noted that you continued to do clinics in the last few years and teach. I was speaking with a rider down in Ocala who'd had a couple of lessons from you, and he was struck by your insight to the approach, even in a jump off. I guess that comes from the fact that you've been a rider, you've been a course designer, and you've been a chef to keep, and you've been a coach. So you bring all these different elements. Will you continue to do the coaching moving forward?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I still do that. I mean, the only thing I cannot really do at this point in time, because I'm still course designing, once I give up course designing altogether, yeah, if it ever happens, maybe I'll be able to work with some riders on a more consistent basis. But I have people that will have me come to their farm like once a week and we do some prep work. But yes, of course. I mean, the knowledge that I have accumulated over the years, obviously, I have a lot of baggage. I do have a lot to offer. And I just have one philosophy. For me, it's always been the same. And it's the same in course design. I mean, I haven't changed anything in 35 years. I've been building, I don't know, I've probably created at least, I calculated it one day, almost close to 16,000 different courses in my career, which is a lot. But my courses now are pretty similar to what they used to be. The philosophy of distances have changed, material has changed. Of course, the sport has evolved a lot. The footing is so much better than it used to be. The horses are better and the riders are better. So you have to keep up with them because you have to keep asking the proper questions. Questions that are modern questions. I don't ask the same questions that I did 20 years ago, but the philosophy of them is the same. And I say, as long as people are happy with that, I'll keep going, but I don't want to keep going until people shove me up.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Is there anything left on your bucket list that you feel you would like to accomplish in the sport as either a designer or a trainer? Is there a venue that you haven't been to that you'd like to go to?
Not really, not really. I do have to admit, I am proud of the career that I've had. I am proud that I was able to do it in different sections of it all. I have no regrets, really. And is there something that I haven't done that I wish would have had the opportunity to do? Not really. I think I've kind of done it all. Now, am I still going to vanish all of a sudden and never show up at an event? No, of course not. And I still will be 100% capable of offering my perspective and my knowledge on what's going on in the sport. But technically, no. And it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. See, these days I'm more concentrating on my grandkids. We have 10 of them.
I was just thinking what a lovely spot to be in. And I would leave you with the question, do you think that 12-year-old boy living outside of Montreal could have ever imagined the future that you have brought to him?
No, I can't, but I'm happy that it did.
I think the rest of us are very happy that it happened too. I do want to say thank you so much for taking time out to meet with me. I really am looking forward to sharing your story with our listeners, and I look forward to seeing what designs come from you in future years and what training looks like in clinics in the future. And I certainly wish you all the best.
Well, thank you very much. You're very welcome.
If you'd like to learn more about the podcast or upcoming guests, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Horse Tales with Kat. And big shout out to those listeners in Virginia, Toronto, and Montreal.